Welcome back, happy fabricators. In this video we're going to show you how to turn a stock razor swing arm from looking like this to look something like this. And when we're done with the demonstration, we're going to give this extended arm to one of you guys, so stick around to find out how. But even if you're not interested in modifying a razor swing arm specifically, I encourage you to stick around because we're going to go over best practices and general tips and techniques for fabrication when it comes to modifying an existing part. Okay, so let's go over the kit specifically. What this is a 3-inch extension kit with dropouts and brake caliper mount for your more popular platform bikes to modify, so the SX500, your MX500, or your MX650s. This kit has the dropouts, so it's going to allow you to eliminate the factory chain tensioner and give you that better performance. So to start off with, what the kit comes with is a zoom brake caliper mount. You can make special requests if you'd like a pit bike one, but it will be a little bit extra charge. Kit comes with the 2 dropout brackets. So they are pre-slotted and pre-mitered to fit the factory bevels on the swing arm. Now this is a weld it yourself kit, so everything is going to need to be welded by you, but we will show you how to do that in this video. We've got 2 of the top gussets, we've got the dropout end caps, we have the brake caliper crush tube and bolt, and then the dropouts. So that's what the kit is going to come with in its entirety. So let's get started building this thing. So to start off with, tools you're going to need a grinder with cutoff wheel. You're going to need a drill with a 1/2-inch drill bit for your caliper lockdown brackets. And then you're going to need a welder, obviously. Now you can pretty much do this with whatever welder you have available to you. You can do it with a stick welder, you can do it with a flux core, you can MIG this, or if you want to get fancy and clean, you can TIG weld this together. First thing you're going to want to do is remove any of the loose components off your swing arm. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is mark all the things that we're going to need to cut off this swing arm. So for this kit, we need to cut off the caliper mount and the factory axle brackets. So what you're going to want to do is take your marking device and lay it right in the crevice of this and just let it fall down, and that's where we're going to be cutting it off. We do not want to cut off the factory cap on this guy because it's going to be much thicker. You're going to have more integrity to weld to, and it'll just be easier for you to weld to the thickness of this cap because it's going to be about 3 times the thickness than the factory tube. So we're going to mark this. That's going to be a cut line. We're going to cut here to cut the brake bracket off. Flip it over on the other side. We're going to do the same thing. Let our marking device run right down the valley there, and we're going to cut that off. We're also going to cut off the factory chain guard mount because it's going to be in the wrong place. And then you can decide for yourself if you want to delete the factory chain tensioner bracket and all that stuff. Okay, so we're going to change our cutoff wheel out for a flapper disc, and then we are going to clean off around the ends of our tubes. Now we're going to grind the welds off just on the inside and the bottom of the tubes. We want to leave the weld on the top and the outside. Okay, so I got this guy all cleaned up now. Now I did do a light grind on the top and the sides, but not to grind the weld off, just to prep and clean the paint to prep for welding. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put a slight bevel on all 4 corners of this end cap so that we get good infill for a weld to penetrate into. So what I mean by that is a bevel, we're going to hold 45 degrees to the corner in every direction and go in about just under 1/8 of an inch or around 2 millimeters ish. So here's one just for example. You can see the slight bevel right here and here and here versus this one has got a sharp edge. So we can make both of them look like that. So now you got your top plate clean and beveled. That's going to allow these extensions to fit properly here on the end. Next thing here is we're going to take the extensions and you're going to put a bevel just like you did there on all 4 corners of the mitered end of your extension. So reason being is this is considered a butt weld. So where you're joining 2 pieces end to end, if there's no bevel there, you are going to have a flat seam, as you can see there, and that weld is going to sit on top. Now that is not going to allow the weld to be as strong as it could. Whereas if you create that valley for that weld to lay into, you're going to be penetrating deeper into the wall of the material, therefore giving more strength. And then in the end, if you need to do any cleanup, or maybe you want to take one weld off to make it pretty or whatever, you're not going to be removing the entirety of the weld, and you're still going to have strength left over. Okay, so the next thing you're going to need is a couple of clamps. I forgot to mention that in the beginning. They can be small weld style clamps or just the simple C-clamp style. You're going to want to take your swing arm and find a flat area that you can lay both these rails on. Now, something that can be an obstacle is this chain guard. If you don't have something that is flat that you can work around this chain guard, you might have to cut this chain guard off so that you can set both of these rails down on a completely flat area. In my case, I have this table saw that is my welding table, and if you're interested in building a DIY fixture table, I will leave some links down in the description to how I built my table saw weld table. But this allows me to actually drop this down inside, and I have an area that chain guard can go through, and I can set both of the legs of the swing arm flat on the table. So once you get both rails of your swing arm on something flat, you can take the extension piece and butt it up against the end of the swing arm, and then you're going to take your gusset, and we're going to use it as a straight edge to clamp this to the swing arm. So we're going to take our clamp, and this is also the reason that I had you take the inside weld off completely and make that flat, is because you need something to use as a straight edge. In this case, we can use our gusset. Clamp the other side up. So now we are flat and we are straight in line with our existing swing arm. Now, one thing to note is the miters on the ends of these swing arms are not all the same, is what I've found. So I averaged out the miter on this extension. So as you can see in this case, there's the tiniest bit of gap. There's about a 1/16 inch of gap here. And in this case, that's going to give us more penetration. It's not going to hurt us because we are using our gusset here as a straight edge. So if that doesn't line up perfectly, that is okay. The important part is to try to make sure that we are straight with the inside of the swing arm tube and that you are flush on the bottom in the relationship between the extension and the factory swing arm. Okay, next thing we're gonna do is fire up our welder and weld this thing together. Wrong. We are going to do a practice run on something. Even professionals practice before they jump straight into a project. This is gonna make sure that you're not having anything wrong with your welder. This is gonna make sure that your settings are proper and give you a quick kind of like jump into it, get your technique dialed in before you weld the actual part, because this is something that's going to be holding you up and it's going to be critical that it is strong and proper. And it looks like I need to turn my heat up a little bit, so that's why we make a practice run. Okay, so while that was all clamped up, we tacked our part in 3 pieces, removed our clamps, moved them over to the other side. We installed the second piece, tacked it up, and I highly recommend not fully welding it until you get both of them tacked up. This is going to allow you to undo it, do a visual inspection, maybe get your level if you don't have a specific flat spot, and just make sure that both pieces are parallel and congruent. And then I'm going to proceed to weld it out. Now I'm going to do this in a specific sequence. I'm going to weld the bottom first, then the top, then my outside, and then my insides. And you're going to be less likely to get distortion if you do it in that order. So now we are going to grind the welds on the bottom flat, and then if you want to be pretty, you can grind the welds on the outside. I highly recommend leaving them just for strength reasons, and then definitely leave the welds on the inside. We're going to take our triangle gussets here. Now the MX500 and the SX are slightly different. The gussets will be a direct slide on for the MX models, but the SX model, there's going to be a Sharpie mark on here, and that will either need to be cut or ground down to that Sharpie line to fit properly on the SX model like I did here. So I took the gusset and I ground it down to the Sharpie line, and now our gusset fits nice and true along our swing arm like so. Now before I weld these out, I'm going to flip the swing arm over, and we are going to take our two arm straps, which are going to be these two little oval guys. And what you want to do is, where we ground the weld off, we're going to want to straddle that weld seam with this strap. Now this is just a reinforcement strap so that you know that you have good strength on the bottom of that arm. Center that on the weld joint and in the center of the tube, and then tack it in. Now something to take note is these two materials are 1/8 inch, and the factory arm on this tube is 1/16 wall. So you're going to want to turn your amperage down a little bit and focus the heat more on the gusset than the tube itself, because the gusset's thicker and is going to take a little more heat so you don't blow through. So now that we got this thing all welded up on the sides and the gussets, we're going to want to find our end caps, which are these little rectangular guys here. And these are going to go right on the end of our extension. Now, there's a couple things to note. We want to make sure that the hole is on the inside of the swing arm. So it sits like this. You can see how it's not flush with the bottom. We're leaving that edge there so that you can fill that whole edge with weld, and then it's centered so the sides can be filled with weld. And we're going to repeat that on both sides. So it's going to look something like that when you're all said and done, where you're welded on all three sides of that little tab. Okay, now that we have our end caps welded on, I'm going to run a little bit of a stitch right here to wrap my corners like I explained earlier. You do not have to weld the entire inside of these guys. And then the final thing we're going to weld is these inside flaps. So they just go down, over, and back up. So that's going to look something like this when you're done with it. I'm going to fill all that in with weld down there. So we'll do the same thing on the opposite side here. Okay, so now that we got all that stuff welded out, next thing we need to do is weld in our crush tube for our brake caliper mount. So take our brake caliper mount out, take our flathead stainless steel piece with our nut and our washer, and then our crush tube on it. And the first thing we need to do is grab our dropouts, and we're going to slide these in on the left side at least. We need to do this. So that'd be like your passenger side if you're in the US of A. And then we're going to take our caliper mount, set it on the outside. So we're just making a mark for reference right now. Drop your axle bolt through the dropout. Okay, so once you've got that set on there and you're completely confident that you are on the left side of your swing arm, the side that your brake caliper is going to be, and take a Sharpie or some sort of marking device, and I'm going to mark about 1/4 inch from the front side of the slot on here. So what we're doing is marking where we're going to drill our hole for a bolt, and this is going to allow this caliper mount to slide forward and back and have proper amount of range. Now this dropout doesn't have enough thread to go all the way forward. If you want to get more stroke out of it and have shorter swing arm per se, you'll have to put a longer thread on these dropouts, but these are just the way they come, so that's the way you're going to get them. And then we're going to drill it out to 1/2 inch. Now, highly recommend running a pilot bit first. And now that we are halfway through, I'm going to use this little tool that I got here. This is called a drill guide, and I can leave a link in the description below. You don't need one of these, but I just really like this tool. It helps you keep your bit completely perpendicular so you know you have a hole going straight through the other side of your tube. Other cool thing about these is they've got a V-groove in them, so you can stick them either on the edge of a square tube or on a round tube and drill straight through a round tube. So they're pretty trick little tools. Then we're going to step up to our 1/2 inch bit and drill all the way through with our 1/2 inch bit. Once you get your hole drilled through both sides, you're going to take and just clean the paint off around the hole. And then while we have our grinder out, I'm going to take and stick my crush tube inside of my drill chuck and go up against my grinder and use it as a sort of lathe to put a bevel on both sides of that crush tube. After that, we are going to take our piece of hardware and I'm going to stick it in the side of the crush tube. I'm going to install it with a washer onto the nut so I can use this to guide it all the way through and hold it like so. And while we're holding that crush tube up in there, we're going to fire up our welder and just put a little tack weld on this side of it. Then I'm going to flip it over and weld out the inside. And then once you get that all ground down and pretty and cleaned up, prep for paint, you should be ready to go. Now the importance of this crush tube is so that you can tighten down your brake caliper and it won't slap around on you. And instead of just running a bolt through, if you tighten down on that bolt, you could crush the wall of that tube and compromise the integrity of that tube. So that crush tube is going to allow you to torque down on that bolt. So I'm going to provide button head with 2 washers. So you install it with button head toward the outside. Brake caliper, the slot goes into the bolt. So we got a nice clean button head on the outside. And then you have your dropout. Axle bolt goes through the dropout and through the brake mount. Now, when you are tensioning your chain, your brake caliper mount slides with your caliper. And then all you got to do is, once you get your chain tensioned properly, you can tighten up that nut and the fastener, and that caliper mount is not going to slap around on you and make noise or move around on you. Other thing to note with these is the nature of these factory swing arms, they go slightly outwards as they go towards the back. So by extending these and keeping parallel with the inside of these extensions are going to get slightly wider. And depending on the swing arm, these things are all made in China and they're all a little bit different. These could splay out too much for the axle to go all the way through. All you need to do there is get yourself a big old C-clamp, or I've even done these where you just kind of like stick them on the curb and bounce your weight on them a little bit. But in any case, you might have to squeeze the end of these arms in like 1/4 to 1/2 inch, depending on what you need to be able to get your axle all the way through it. Or if you don't want to, you can get larger spacers for your wheels and get a longer axle. We'll leave that up to you. Another thing to consider on these SX arms, you do not have to worry about this on the MX arms because they have, the hoop comes up closer and then they've got a support bar that drops down to the front here. But because you're lengthening this, you are putting more leverage on this upper arm, and these are only 1/16 inch wall. If you're just street running, this is going to be more than fine. But if you're going to be doing any sort of curb hopping or off-roading, I highly recommend adding some sort of tube gusset to kind of come down into these regions, but I'm going to leave that up to your discretion. A lot of people have never had a problem with it, but I have seen people fold up these SX arms like that before. So just something to consider. So if you'd be interested in purchasing one of these swing arms, hit me up on Instagram at amcustomfab and I'll let you know if there's any in stock left over from this batch or future batches. And like I said in the beginning of the video, we're going to be giving this arm away to one of you guys. No purchase necessary. So all you got to do to win this arm is you have to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below, I would run that arm. So I'm going to give it 2 weeks. So May 11th is 2 weeks from today. On May 11th, I will take all the comments that say I would run that arm. I'll stick them in a randomizer and I will pick one of those comments and I'll reach out to you, send you my email, get your information, and we will get this arm shipped off to you. Must be in the US to qualify. I'm going to cover shipping and everything, and we'll get that sent out to you, one of you guys. If somebody contacts you disguised as me asking you for money, that's not me. I'm going to cover all the shipping and all that stuff. So don't fall for a bot or a trick or anything like that. So once again, if you want to see more fabrication content, click some of the links that are going to pop up here. If you want to be notified of upcoming videos, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. It's free to do so. And go build something, guys. Also, follow me on Instagram. You'll see more of this kind of stuff where I build crazy projects. And just for reference, this is the giveaway arm in its final state, all cleaned up and painted hammer gray. It's going to come with your choice of a Zoom or pit bike caliper mount and a set of dropout tensioners. Hope one of you guys enjoys this. See you on the next one.